Hey guys, welcome back. So in this final video, I'm going to go over how to build our rooms and how to finalize the game. So let's start right there. So we've got all of our objects set up. We've got all of our sounds and sprites. So everything is ready to go at this point. We've built all the building blocks for our game. We just need to put them together into the rooms. So I'm going to double click my room 1. And you can see that room 1 has this tiny little house next to it. If you click on the little house, then what that lets you do is it lets you see the rooms, the room order. And you want to make sure that room 1 is your first one. That's the starting room. The little house represents the starting room. And then room 2 comes after it. You could actually change. Yeah, if you put room 2 at the top, that's not good. We want room to be our first room. Okay, anyway, so that's for doing room order. This is very useful for things like if you're building a platformer and you've got a ton of different levels and you're working on a level that's, level 15 or something where you want to be able to test it fairly easily, you can always bring it to the very top of the list and then you can start right in that level 15 or so. Okay, so for my rooms, I've actually gone ahead and built everything into the room. We've set up the camera and viewports back in the initial project setup video. But so let me go over how to place these little guys. First thing I want to do is I want to place them at perfect distances from each other in a grid. Now to do that, I need to know how big my little guys are. So my characters are 16 by 16 and their center point is at 8 and 8 pixels. So when I'm placing them in my room, I want to set up a grid. You can set up a grid by going up to the top right corner here, clicking on this box. And I want to set up a grid that's going to help me place them at good locations. So I think choosing something like 24 by 24. Yep, that's what I did the first time. And having snap enabled gives you this nice grid where you can place them 8 pixels apart from each other. And it's 8 pixels apart because each one of these guys is 16. The grid is 24, so there's going to be 8 pixels between each one of these guys, both in the upwards and the sideways direction. So that was my first step, setting the grid. Once I've set the grid, first object that I pulled in was the game controller. So to place objects in your room, you have to make sure the instances layer is selected in the top left of the layers. Click on the object that you want and you can drag it into the room. Another way to drag it into the room is if you have them clicked here. If you press the Alt key on your keyboard, then you can place the object. So if you need to place multiple objects instead of dragging them in one by one, you can simply hold down Alt and then it's ready to be placed. Another note is, remember, if you hold down the Control key, you can zoom in and out from your room. If you press the middle mouse button down, you can pan the room, and that way you can move around the room as you're building it. So for some reason, if you wanted to zoom in on one of these shields, you could do that using the Control key. Okay, and then you can also reset the view or center fit the view by pressing this button here. Okay, so place the game controller, then place the top row should be bad guy 3. So I click on bad guy 3, hold down the Alt key, and then I place them across, only one of them per intersection here, all the way across. Now I did leave some space on this side because they're going to start moving to the right, and then they start moving down. Bad guy 2, same thing. So the second row is made of bad guy 2s. Bad guy 1 is the very first row, or bottom row, I mean. I tried to place the hero kind of close to the ground. So once you've placed your bad guys, at that point, it's probably time to switch the grid. So once they're in place and you've used the grid for that, you can go back up to the grid and change the grid to something like 1 and 1. 1 and 1 is the smallest grid you can have, or the other option is to turn off snap. I do like to instead, set it to 1 and 1, and then at least I know it's at an integer value instead of a in between. Then you select your hero and you can see how it's snapping every pixel up and down. And I just try to put him very close. Maybe I should actually move him under a shield, maybe a little bit up. There we go. So there's my hero. Let me talk about these platforms. So these platforms are, if you zoom in enough, you start seeing these little lines show up. I'm not sure how well the recording is capturing this, but you see these little squares show up. So each one of these, or I guess 2 by 2, each 2 by 2 one of these is a platform block, because we made our platform blocks 2 by 2. So it might actually be a good idea to change your grid to a 2 by 2 at this point. There we go. And then you can see each one of these takes up one of these blocks. And all I did, this took some time. So I selected the platform block or object, held down the Alt key, and kind of like painted rows of this until I got a pattern which I was satisfied with. I think at first I made it too big, so I ended up deleting some of the edges and so forth. To delete objects, you can click on them and press the delete key on the keyboard. You can also delete multiple objects by holding down Shift, dragging across, highlighting them, and then pressing delete. So that's what I did. So I built one of these. It took a little time. And then once I was satisfied with the way it looked, what I did was I hold down Shift, highlight the whole thing. So I've selected all of these little tiny blocks. Press Control C. Control C is to copy something. Then you press Control V, and then you can see it creates a copy for you. And then you can place the copy, over here. Then I press Control V again, make another copy, move it over, and make another copy, move it over. And if you ever do something that you don't like, you can always go Control Z or Control Z and then undo what you just did. Okay, so that's how I placed all these things. There's one last thing, which is the instructions. So go to instructions and place it. I did have to place it kind of off screen because remember the anchor point of this object is up in the top left corner. It has no sprite. So when an object has no sprite, its anchor point is the top left corner. This question mark doesn't represent this object properly. The actual object only takes up this one little dot that's in the corner. But so it's going to be typing text from there going leftwards because I used a right alignment. So it's going to type the text instructions out this way. And so this one you can play around with, just move it up and down, left to right, depending on where you want it to be. So that is the main room. This is where the main game is going to take place. There is a background layer. You can change the color of the background if you want to, have something else. I'm sticking to black just because that's kind of like the theme of the minimal amount of not an artist type of games that I'll be making. But you guys are welcome to draw a really nice background and set the sprite for it. You can stretch it to fill the screen properly. Okay, so maybe if you have maybe this is taking place on Earth or Mars, so maybe you had like a background with some skies and mountains, and then you could set that so it actually feels like you're playing this game on a planet and you're protecting the planet. Okay, so that's that for that room. And the second room is much easier. Let's zoom out. So this room, the only object that you need is the game over object. Drag it, place it in the very middle. So this is the very middle of the room, which means the text will come out in the very middle of the room. And that's it. So actually, I'm not sure. This is actually doesn't. That's not the very middle of the room. I think to get to the middle of the room, we need to go 16 by 16. Here's how you do it. You look at the width of the room. So the width of the room is 304. So if I change my grid to be 152, there you go. That's the middle of the room. So I need to actually grab this guy. And I should move him. Yeah, there we go. So now he's in the middle of the room properly. Vertically, he's also not in the middle of the room, so I can change that. The height of the room is 200. So if I set my grid to be 100, there we go. So you can see that he's not in the middle of the room. That's the proper middle of the room. So now this guy, even though he looks like he's off to the right a little bit, remember this object has no sprites, so its coordinate is actually in the top left corner. So now he's perfectly in the middle of the room. And that's it. So that's the two rooms. We've got everything ready to go. So now if I click play, cross our fingers, and let's hope that the game works. And you can see it's working. You got sound effects, you got blinking, you got instructions, you got a high score loaded in from before. It's just like the real game in the arcades. I think the only thing that's missing is every now and then in the arcade game, there would be an alien spaceship that flies across the top, and we did not code that. So I'll leave that as a challenge for you guys to figure out how to do. You've learned about alarms. You can use alarms or something similar to make that work. And then that spaceship would also use an alarm in itself to maybe shoot some bullets at you and so on. So I think it's a very doable task for you guys to try and tackle. And with that, the game is done. Thank you for watching. This tutorial was a bit more difficult than the previous ones, especially the game controller and the logic in that. but this is just how you advance in game design. And you know, remember that we did some new things. We used the game over. We used scripts to create a game over script, and we also used this referencing tool where you can use the with word and reference a bunch of objects and control them from different objects. So with that, I hope you enjoyed the videos, and see you guys in the next tutorial, whatever that might be.